Welcome to the lectures and assignments from Design and Build School of KING-KAMBUF. This is the DBSK Daily Lecture and Assignment Review for Thursday, December 4th, 2025.
And for everyone in the Integrated Master's to PhD program, you know this is a big one. We're covering architecture, civil engineering, urban planning, public admin, construction management.
All coming together today.
Exactly, because the topic demands it. Green stormwater infrastructure and complete street sections for building truly climate-resilient urban corridors.
We are really digging into a fantastic set of sources today, all provided by the services of KING-KAMBUF Architecture Design Studios. And let's be clear, we are not just glossing over design concepts here.
No, not at all. The focus today for all of you in the cohort is about quantifying the benefits of GSI and then getting into the really nitty-gritty technical and policy levers you need to pull to make this stuff work.
So our mission today is to get past the fuzzy statements about greening the city.
Right. We need to synthesize the measurable triple bottom line benefits. I mean, the financial, the social, and the environmental.
And for your cohort, it's about uncovering the specific design criteria, the policy changes that are required for this to be deployed effectively and at scale.
Right where it matters most, in the public urban corridor.
Okay, so let's jump right in. We have to set the stage with the biggest problem that GSI is, I think, uniquely positioned to solve, maybe even more than traditional gray infrastructure.
And that is the urban heat island effect, the UHI.
UHI.
It is the absolute fundamental climate challenge for our cities. It's not a model, it's not a theory, it's a physical reality.
You can feel it when you walk from a park onto a blacktop parking lot in July.
You absolutely can. We know that urban materials, your steel, your concrete, your asphalt, they have low albedo. They absorb incredible amounts of solar energy all day long.
Way more than a natural landscape would.
Right, orders of magnitude more. And then, and this is the crucial part, they re-radiate that heat slowly all through the night. The city never gets a chance to cool down.
And you've also got to factor in the anthropogenic heat sources, right? The waste heat from everything we do.
Everything. The exhaust from millions of cars, the heat pumps on top of every building, just pouring hot air out from the air conditioning systems, industrial processes.
All of that energy is just dumped straight into the atmosphere at street level.
And that combination is what drives city temperatures so much higher than the surrounding rural areas. It's why GSI isn't just a way to manage rainwater.
It's a climate adaptation strategy.
It's a direct intervention aimed at reversing that systemic energy absorption.
All right, let's start there with the direct, measurable impact. If you implement these green practices across a whole city, what kind of temperature change do you actually see?
Well, the most robust studies, the ones that look at distributed GSI across a whole area, they show a decrease in the ambient air temperature of between 0.5 and 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
Now, I can already hear some of our civil engineering students thinking, hold on, 1.8 degrees? That seems marginal.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about the huge cost of a citywide retrofit.
It's a fair question, but it's one your cohort has to be able to answer. That seemingly modest number is incredibly important.
Why?
Because of the nonlinear relationship between temperature and public health, especially during what we call extreme heat events, or EHEs.
Yep.
When the ambient temperature is hovering right around a critical human threshold, let's say 98 degrees Fahrenheit, a drop of just 1.8 degrees can pull a massive segment of the population out of the immediate danger zone for thermal stress.
So it's not about comfort, it's about moving people back from a physiological cliff.
Precisely. And we'll get to quantifying the value of that later. But these small reductions, scaled across millions of people, translate directly into avoided deaths.
And it's important to remember that the 0.5 to 1.8 degree number, that's the generalized citywide ambient effect. The microclimate effect is much, much bigger.
Yes, absolutely. The power of canopy cover is the immediate relief system. When you stand under a tree, you're not getting a 1.8 degree reduction.
Not even close.
The surface temperature in a directly shaded area can be 10, even 20 degrees cooler. The design strategy has to balance both of these effects, the broad ambient cooling and the immediate localized relief of shade.
Let's get into the physics of it. The sources are pretty clear that GSI uses two main cooling mechanisms. It's not just about shade.
Right. First, you have evaporative cooling. The vegetation itself, tree leaves, plants in a green roof, they're constantly pulling water from the soil and releasing it as vapor. That process, evapotranspiration, requires a huge amount of thermal energy.
So it's literally pulling heat out of the air to turn water into gas.
It's nature's air conditioner. The second mechanism is insulation, and this is key for green roofs. A conventional black roof absorbs heat and transfers it right into the building.
Driving up cooling costs.
Hugely. But a green roof, with its soil and plant layer, acts as a thermal barrier. It drastically reduces that heat transfer into the building envelope.
That's a critical distinction for the architects in our group.
Yeah.
So let's talk design numbers. The studies say you see measurable benefits when you convert between 6% and 31% of an impervious area to GSI.
And this leads us to a really interesting design trade-off. It kind of challenges the conventional wisdom that just more green is always better for heat.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It turns out the type of intervention matters a lot. One of the studies we're looking at found something pretty surprising.
Which was?
That increasing the surface albedo, basically making surfaces more reflective with things like light-colored permeable concrete or special coatings, resulted in about a 44% greater temperature reduction than increasing vegetative cover by the exact same area.
44%, that's a huge number.
It's a massive finding, especially for the civil engineers and planners who are managing miles and miles of pavement.
So for a big arterial road or a massive parking lot where you just can't dig up the ground for trees.
Using high albedo materials might be the single most efficient use of that space for cooling.
Okay, but then what's the trade-off? If reflective surfaces are so much more effective per square foot, why are we still talking so much about trees?
That's the perfect question, and it's the kind of nuance this cohort has to master. High albedo surfaces are great for one thing, reflecting heat. But that's all they do.
They don't manage stormwater?
They don't manage stormwater, they don't filter air pollutants, they can create glare issues for drivers, and they need to be kept clean to stay reflective. Trees, on the other hand, while they might take up more space and take longer to mature.
They do all of those things.
All of them, plus the immediate shade, the aesthetics, the habitat. So it's not an either-or.
It's an integrated approach. You use the high-efficiency albedo on the big exposed surfaces, and you prioritize trees and green roofs for their multi-benefit services.
Exactly, and we see that in the data. The GSI type matters.
Huh?
Trees and green roofs consistently provide higher overall cooling benefits than just ground-level vegetation, probably because they're affecting the atmosphere higher up, not just the surface itself.
This brings us directly to the socioeconomic side of things, heat equity. Because UHI isn't just an engineering puzzle, it's a public health crisis that exposes some really deep historical inequities in how we built our cities.
It really is. I mean, it's a tragic fact, but heat is the leading weather-related killer in the United States.
More than floods, more than hurricanes.
By far. We're talking over 1,500 premature deaths and nearly 70,000 emergency room visits every single year that are directly linked to heat. So for many cities, managing heat stress is actually a higher priority for life safety than managing floods.
And the data is just crystal clear that this burden is not shared equally.
Not at all. Extreme heat events disproportionately harm people of color and low-income communities.
And the sources connect this directly back to historical patterns of disinvestment, things like redlining.
Yes. For the planners and policy students, this is something you have to internalize. These policies systematically denied investment to marginalized neighborhoods. That resulted in older, poorly insulated housing, less access to air conditioning, and this is key way, less municipal investment in things like parks and street trees.
Which creates a measurable physical difference today. The sources cite an analysis from Tacoma, Washington.
And it's a shocking one. They found that neighborhoods that were historically redlined are, today, up to 14 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than other neighborhoods in the very same city.
14 degrees. That is a massive difference. It's a physical scar from a policy decision.
It is. And because of that, citing GSI has to be done through a mandatory equity lens. It can't be an afterthought. The data shows that to have a real impact on heat-related deaths and illnesses, you need wide-scale implementation, something like a 10 percentage point increase in vegetated area across these vulnerable districts.
So we can't just plant trees where it's easy or cheap.
Absolutely not. We have to prioritize the high-risk, high-exposure, historically neglected communities first.
Which creates a policy challenge, right? You're balancing helping the most vulnerable people with getting the most bang for your buck from an intervention.
It is a balancing act, but the data gives us a clear rule for prioritization. GSI projects provide the greatest benefit when they are sited in areas with high population density and high risk.
So you add vegetation, but is very little to begin with.
You got it. If a neighborhood already has 40% tree canopy, Adding a couple of rain gardens has a very small marginal benefit. You put those same resources into a dense urban corridor with only 5% canopy, and the impact is huge.
And you also have to be smart about where you put it within the street itself.
Right. You avoid the narrow streets between tall buildings because the buildings are already providing a lot of shade. You focus your efforts on the wide open street canyons where the sun exposure is at its maximum.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So we've established the primary thermal and social reasons for GSI. Now let's shift to what you call the cascade of co-benefits. This is where the business case really starts to come together.
This is where the public administration and construction management students can really start to build the justification for a triple bottom line investment. And we can start with the most direct financial return: energy savings.
The connection seems pretty obvious. It's cooler outside, so you use less AC inside.
It's that simple, and the numbers are stark. For every 1 degree Celsius increase in the ambient temperature, a single building's peak electricity load goes up by as much as 4.6%.
Wow. So by mitigating UHI, GSI is directly flattening that peak demand curve for the utility.
Which is incredibly expensive and usually powered by the most carbon-intensive peaker plants.
Green roofs seem to be the most dramatic example of this. The studies show they can cut a building's energy use by anywhere from 7% to a staggering 90%.
That range, 7 to 90%, is the key takeaway for our architecture students. It tells a really important story.
What's the variable there?
It's almost entirely about the building's starting condition. If you have an old building with terrible insulation, single-pane windows, and ancient HVAC system,
The green roof is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
a ton. It's providing a thermal buffer that the rest of the building envelope is failing to provide. That's where you see the 90% savings. But if you have a brand new, super efficient, well-insulated building,
The savings will be on the lower end, closer to 7%.
exactly, maybe 7 to 15%, because you're only getting the benefit related purely to the roof section itself. But even that is significant.
So in many ways, GSI acts as a remedial solution for our older, less efficient building stock, but still provides a crucial benefit.
It does. And you see a similar, though less dramatic, effect with trees at the residential scale.
Right, the data says homes surrounded by trees see energy savings between 3 and 25%.
And this is highly quantifiable. You can use tools like the U.S. Forest Service's iTree software. It lets planners put a real dollar value on these ecosystem services, and it's all based on local climate data.
And those values change a lot depending on where you are.
They really do. Let's look at the annual electricity savings from a single mature street tree, say at year 30. In a place like the Midwest, that tree is worth about $39.84 a year in saved electricity. Okay.
But you take that same analysis to Central Florida, and the value drops to just $12.66 per tree.
Wait, that seems backward. Florida's much hotter. Shouldn't the savings be higher?
It's a great question, and it shows how complex this is. It's likely a combination of factors: regional utility rates, the specific angle of the sun, and the balance between the cooling and heating seasons.
Ah, so in the Midwest, the tree gives you summer shade, but also acts as a windbreak in the winter.
It's providing a dual season benefit. In Florida, the cooling demand is higher, but maybe the utility rates are structured differently, or the solar geometry is just different. It reinforces the point that all of these calculations have to be extremely region-specific.
For the private sector folks, there's a really clear financial case study here with the Target Center Arena in Minneapolis.
A great example, their 113,000 square foot green roof cut their annual energy bill by $300,000. That's in 2020 dollars.
So that shows that the upfront capital cost for a high-performance roof can be paid back not just in lower maintenance, but in immediate operational savings, which is very, very attractive for construction managers and developers working on large-scale projects.
All right, let's shift from energy to air quality and public health. This is where those energy savings start to generate massive societal returns.
It's a direct link. When GSI reduces that peak cooling demand, it means power plants are running less. And that directly reduces emissions of some really nasty pollutants.
We're talking sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides.
SO2, NOx, and particulate matter, PM2.5. All the stuff associated with burning fossil fuels for electricity.
And it's not just about what's coming out of the power plant smokestacks. Mitigating UHI also affects the chemistry of the air in the city itself.
Right. It messes with the formation of ground-level ozone, which is the main component of smog. The relationship is complex, but basically, high temperatures act like an accelerator for the chemical reactions that create ozone.
So you need the precursor pollutants, the VOCs, and NOx from cars.
And you need the heat to cook them into smog. The example from Los Angeles is powerful. Smog levels there increase by 5% for every 1.8 degree Fahrenheit. The temperature goes up once it's above about 71 degrees.
So GSI doesn't get rid of the pollution, but it removes the thermal accelerator.
It takes the foot off the gas pedal of smog formation.
This brings us to a really critical concept for the policy and planning students.
Yeah.
How do you monetize these health outcomes? How do you put a dollar value on cleaner air?
The foundational tool for this is the EPA's BENMAP CE program. It's the Environmental Benefits Mapping and Analysis Program. It's what lets us quantify these health benefits in dollar terms.
So what are those numbers? What's the value of reducing these pollutants?
They're substantial. Because these pollutants cause really severe respiratory and cardiac problems, reducing 1 ton of NOx emissions is valued at about $10,600. Reducing a ton of SO2 is valued at almost $70,000.
Okay, those are big numbers. But the metric that really drives these analyses is the value of a statistical life, the VSL. We need to be really clear about what this means.
We do. The VSL is one of the most intellectually rigorous, but also one of the most easily misunderstood concepts in policy. It is not the value of a specific person's life.
Right.
It's the aggregate amount that a whole population is willing to pay to achieve a small collective reduction in the risk of dying prematurely. It's a risk reduction metric. And the current VSL is estimated at $10.7 million per avoided death.
So if your GSI plan is modeled to prevent, say, 50 premature heat-related deaths over the next 30 years.
That's over $500 million in quantifiable social benefit that you can put on the plus side of your ledger.
And that's before you even count the non-fatal outcomes.
Exactly. Avoiding a single hospital admission for heat stroke or an asthma attack is valued at somewhere between $18,000 and $49,000 per case. When you add all of this up in a TBL analysis, the social benefit frequently dwarfs the construction cost.
Okay, let's circle back to water, the original mandate for GSI. We need to talk about how gray infrastructure actively harms streams and rivers with heat.
This is what we call the urban stream syndrome. Conventional gray infrastructure is all about rapid conveyance. Get the water off the street and into the stream as fast as you possibly can.
You're trading flooding in the city for other problems downstream.
You are. You're trading it for chronic pollution, for unnaturally high and fast flows, what we call hydromodification, and you see negative impacts on aquatic life when a watershed gets to be as little as 4 to 6% impervious.
And GSI is designed to do the opposite, right? To mimic natural, slow, distributed retention.
Yes, through infiltration and evapotranspiration. But the heat component is the real killer here.
The runoff gets heated up by the pavement.
It gets superheated. That runoff flowing over 150-degree asphalt in the summer hits the cool stream and causes an immediate thermal shock. It's like pouring boiling water into a fish tank.
Which stresses the fish, lowers the dissolved oxygen.
Increases acidity, promotes pathogen growth. It's a disaster for the ecosystem.
And this becomes a regulatory and financial problem, not just an environmental one. The case study from Portland, Oregon is a perfect example.
It's a fantastic case study. The utility there, Clean Water Services, was facing a huge compliance issue. The water temperature in their streams was too high for fish habitat, probably for salmon runs protected under the Endangered Species Act.
So they were looking at massive fines or having to build some kind of expensive mechanical solution.
Exactly. The gray infrastructure solution would have been to build and operate mechanical chillers, giant refrigerators for the river.
Which sounds incredibly expensive and energy intensive.
It is. Instead, they modeled a major tree planting project along the stream banks. The canopy from the trees was projected to block 18.8 million kilocalories of solar energy per mile per day from even hitting the water.
So use nature's solution.
And look at the economics. The tree planting project cost $18.3 million. That project was estimated to save $74.7 million compared to building and running the chillers.
So it was cheaper, it was more effective, and it provided dozens of other benefits that the chillers didn't.
That's a profound lesson for our civil engineers. GSI is often the economically superior long-term choice.
Okay, we've made the case for why. Now let's get into the how. Part 3 is all about the engineering rigor. For our technical cohort, how do you design this stuff for high performance in a tight urban space?
It all starts with data-driven planning. We're moving from theory to actually deciding where to put these things, and that requires very specific data.
And municipalities are using satellite data for this now.
More and more. Specifically, surface temperature data from the USGS and NASA Landsat satellites.
Why is that data so valuable?
Because it's high resolution, it's consistent, and it's quantifiable. And it turns out that satellite-derived surface temperature, when you pair it with vegetation data, correlates really well with the actual air temperature on the ground.
Over 90% correlation, according to the sources.
Which is incredible. It lets a city planner generate a really accurate thermal map of their entire city and immediately see the hotspots.
And then, once you have that heat map, you have to apply the equity lens we talked about earlier.
You must. You overlay the high heat areas with your socioeconomic vulnerability, data poverty rates, age demographics, communities of color. That integrated map shows you your highest risk zones.
Like those neighborhoods in Tacoma that were 14 degrees hotter.
That's how you find them.
Yeah.
This process moves GSI planning from being opportunistic, oh, there's a spot here, to being strategically essential.
Okay, so that data-driven process then leads to the design of the actual bioretention system. This is the workhorse of a green complete street.
It is. A bioretention system is just a general term for a practice that uses special plants and engineered soil media, the BSM, to filter, infiltrate, and evapotranspire runoff.
So things like bioretention cells, bioswales, vegetated filter strips.
All part of the same family.
For our engineering students, let's talk about sizing. How big does one of these things need to be?
The standard rule of thumb is that you need to dedicate between 5 and 10% of the impervious area that drains to the practice, to the footprint of the practice itself.
Okay, 5 to 10%.
And you need a minimum size, usually around 200 square feet, to make sure the water has enough contact time with the media to actually get treated.
And then there are the hydraulic controls.
Yeah.
You have to make sure the water flows correctly.
This is so critical. If the water just rushes through one part of the system, it's not getting treated. So the surface slope should be very gentle, no more than 1%, to let the water spread out evenly. Side slopes should be 3 to 1 or flatter.
And then you have the drawdown time. The MPCA standard is a 48-hour drawdown. Why that specific number?
It's a two-part reason. First, it's a public health rule. You don't want standing water for more than 2 days because it becomes a breeding ground for mosquitoes.
Makes sense.
But second, and this is crucial for the engineers, if the water sits for too long, the soil becomes anaerobic. It runs out of oxygen.
And that shuts down the biological treatment processes.
It shuts down the most important ones, like the microbial processes that break down nitrogen pollutants. So for good total nitrogen removal, you want an infiltration rate of about 1 to 2 inches per hour. 1 inch is even better.
But interestingly, the sources say that for temperature reduction, a slower rate is actually better.
It is. A slower rate, say less than 2 inches an hour, means the water stays in contact with the plants and soil longer, which maximizes the opportunity for that evaporative cooling to happen.
So the designer has a trade-off. Fast enough to drain in 48 hours and stay aerobic, but slow enough to maximize treatment and cooling.
That is the balancing act. And the 48-hour rule is usually the non-negotiable constraint you have to design within.
Let's talk about what's underneath the system. There's a hard rule about a 3-foot minimum separation. What's that about?
This is a critical safety requirement. You need a 3-foot minimum separation between the bottom of your bioretention practice and either the seasonally high water table or the top of the bedrock.
And if you don't have that?
You risk a couple of catastrophic failures. One, if you connect directly to the groundwater, you can send pollutants from the street runoff straight into the aquifer. It's a direct conduit for contamination.
And 2,
if the water table rises up into your system, it becomes permanently saturated, it fails completely, it goes anaerobic, and it stops working.
and you also have to keep it away from building foundations and pavement.
Highly recommended. You want to avoid seepage that can undermine a foundation, and you want to prevent frost heave, which is when freezing water expands and can literally lift and crack the adjacent pavement.
Okay, let's get into the soil itself.
Mm.
The bioretention soil media, or BSM. This is where engineering, chemistry, and landscape architecture all meet.
It's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
The standard Minnesota recommendation is a great starting point. It's a mix of 60 to 70% sand, 15 to 25% topsoil, and 15 to 25% organic matter, like a specific grade of compost.
And that mix is designed to balance the need for fast drainage with the need for biological activity.
Exactly. The sand gives you the high permeability, and the organic matter gives you the chemical and biological functions.
But that organic matter, the compost, presents a huge challenge when it comes to phosphorus pollution.
This is the critical detail. Compost is essential for getting the microbial communities established and for binding pollutants like heavy metals. But standard compost is often loaded with phosphorus.
So the system designed to clean the water could actually end up polluting it.
It can become a net source of phosphorus pollution, exporting it into the stream instead of removing it. It's a known failure mode.
So how do you prevent that?
You have to specify a BSM with a low phosphorus index. The target is between 10 and 30 milligrams per kilogram. That's enough to support healthy plants, but not so much that it leaches out. This requires careful sourcing and testing of your compost.
And the final piece is the particle size. You have to control the amount of fines.
You have to be ruthless about it. BSM needs to maintain a long-term infiltration rate of 5 to 10 inches per hour. That high rate is only possible if you strictly limit the fine particles, the silts and clays. They should be less than 5% and ideally only 2 to 4%.
Any more than that, and the system clogs up over time.
It silts in and fails. End of story.
And there's ongoing research into other amendments, right? Things like perlite or calcined clay.
Yes, the science is still evolving. Perlite and vermiculite can improve drainage while also holding more water for the plants, which is great for drought tolerance. And calcined clay is interesting because it has a very high cation exchange capacity, so it's great at grabbing dissolved metals.
But the research on that is still new.
Very new. The sources note there's no long-term data on its use in GSI soils yet, which just underscores that we are still learning and refining these designs based on real-world monitoring.
Which brings us to part 4. The business case and the barriers to getting this done. For our public admin and construction management folks, how do you justify this financially?
You have to move beyond the old way of just calculating the cost of pipes and concrete. You have to adopt a triple bottom line framework.
So you're formally accounting for the financial, environmental, and social outcomes.
Yes. Traditional benefit cost analysis just ignores the value of clean air or fewer heat deaths or better quality of life. TBL forces utilities, like the ones in Seattle and Philadelphia, to actually put those benefits on the balance sheet.
And this is most powerful when you look at the entire life cycle cost.
Absolutely. The example from West Union, Iowa is perfect. They used permeable pavement on a street. It cost more upfront than asphalt. But the maintenance and repair costs were so much lower that it started saving them money by year 15. Over the 57-year life of the project, it resulted in $2.5 million in cumulative savings.
So the higher capital cost was more than justified by the lower long-term costs.
And sometimes it's even cheaper upfront. In Minnesota, the Capital Region Watershed District found that using GSI infiltration practices cost $2.5 million, while the traditional storm sewer pipe alternative was going to cost $2.5 million.
So it was cheaper, and it provided a ton of extra benefit.
Cheaper, and it solved multiple problems at once. The pipe only solved one.
But the most powerful data point, the one that really sells the TBL approach, has to be the analysis from the Philadelphia Water Department.
It is the mic drop moment for GSI economics. They were facing a massive mandate to control their combined sewer overflows. They compared two options: building a massive traditional gray tunnel or using a widespread 50% green infrastructure approach.
Yeah, and the results.
The TBL analysis showed that the green approach would generate total cumulative benefits of $2.8 billion by the year 2049.
$2.8 billion. And the gray tunnel.
Just $122 million.
That is a staggering difference. $2,800 million versus $122 million. What accounts for that massive gap?
It's entirely the social and environmental benefits. The tunnel only provided the benefit of avoiding regulatory fines. The Green Plan monetized everything we've talked about: the public health benefits from cleaner air and less heat, the energy savings, the increased property values. TBL makes the invisible visible.
But this overwhelming justification brings us right to the biggest barrier: the need for standardized monitoring and data.
It's the implementation paradox. The strength of GSI is that it's tailored to a specific site. But that very specificity creates uncertainty about its long-term performance, which makes risk-averse agencies nervous about adopting it.
And the performance data we do have is all over the place. I mean, the sources say that some bioretention facilities can actually operate as net sources of pollution.
That finding should send a chill down the spine of every designer in our cohort. If your system is adding phosphorus to the river instead of removing it, how can you possibly justify these multi-billion-dollar investments?
It just highlights the urgent need for adaptive management.
We have to be using continuous, real-time monitoring data to see what's working and what isn't, and then feed that information back into our designs to make the next generation of projects better.
So what's the policy fix? What are experts recommending regulators do to solve this data crisis?
They're saying we need to use the power of the Clean Water Act, specifically the NPDES permits and the CSO consent decrees, to force the issue.
So mandate better data collection.
Exactly. First, incentivize people to contribute to the International Stormwater BMP database. Second, and this is huge, adopt standardized monitoring protocols so we can compare data apples to apples across different cities. And third, attach quantitative monitoring requirements to at least a subset of all new GSI installations.
You have to measure what you manage.
That shift from voluntary reporting to mandatory standardized monitoring is the single most important policy lever we have to advance the science of GSI.
Okay, let's talk funding. Heat mitigation, as we said, often falls between the cracks of traditional agency budgets.
It's not just a transportation project, it's not just a parks project, it's not just a utility project, it's all three, so you have to get creative.
And tap into non-traditional sources.
Right. You can go after EPA environmental justice grants, the NOAA Urban Heat Island Mapping Program, and the big one, FEMA's BRIC grant program. Building resilient infrastructure and communities. There are billions of dollars available there.
But to get that money, you need coordination.
You need everyone at the table. Transportation, parks, utilities, all pooling their resources. And you need external partners. Look at Louisville, Kentucky. The nonprofit Crees Louisville partnered with the sewer district and the city to plant over 16,000 trees. They solved a public health problem using utility funds.
Finally, we have to talk about the reality of maintenance. O&M. This isn't like maintaining a concrete pipe.
It is a huge, huge challenge. This skill set is completely different. You need people who know how to manage vegetation and soil, not just run a vacuum truck. Kirkland, Washington, had to create whole new training programs for their maintenance staff.
And that costs money that often isn't budgeted for.
It's a classic problem of unfunded mandates.
And it gets even more complicated when the GSI is on private property.
Oh, that's a massive planning headache. You have to have clear, legally binding maintenance agreements in place to ensure that a homeowners association or a private owner is actually taking care of this public asset. Without that, the whole system falls apart.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Let's synthesize the key takeaways for our integrated cohort. I think the fundamental lesson from this deep dive is that GSI is no longer just a niche tool for stormwater.
Not at all. These are essential, quantifiable climate adaptation assets. They deliver a level of return that gray infrastructure just cannot touch.
You have measurable energy savings, you have massive public health returns that you can quantify with VSL and avoided hospital visits, and you have real ecosystem restoration.
Your challenge as the next generation of architects, engineers, planners, and administrators is to master this multi-benefit TBL-driven design framework. You have to move beyond solving one problem at a time.
The difference between the $2.8 billion benefit of Philly's Green Plan and the $122 million from the Gray Tunnel, that just shows the scale of the opportunity. It's a professional mandate, really.
We've established that GSI performance is highly variable. We know that some installations can even fail and become sources of pollution. We also established that the single most effective thing regulators can do is mandate monitoring and data sharing to fix that problem.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought. This is your assignment, really. If accelerating our learning and achieving true climate resilience depends entirely on closing this data gap, what are the ethical and professional obligations of designers and builders, of you, to proactively share not just your successes, but also your failures? To share the data from projects that didn't perform as expected so that the entire field can learn faster and we can ensure these massive benefits we're calculating are actually being achieved on the ground.
Think about that. Think about the level of transparency and accountability it will take to build truly resilient cities.